we are here today with Florian, and we're going to be talking about OAuth and APIs. So I just want to leave the floor to Florian.
Thank you very much. So welcome everyone. Today I'm going to talk about OAuth and the Fotoware API. And we will be doing some hands-on, I will give you some hands-on introduction to it and show you how, the inner workings of OAuth and how to implement OAuth in your applications. We will not be doing live coding here, so I will show you how OAuth works without showing you any code. You will get a general idea of what needs to be implemented after this technical demo. So let's reintroduce OAuth. You may have seen these slides before if you have been at the Partner Summit. OAuth is basically the protocol to solve all your user authentication and SSO needs in your custom applications, whether you're building a mobile app or a native app or a Windows or Mac application. If you need user authentication in your apps, OAuth is what we recommend. We chose OAuth because it is an industry standard and because it puts users in control. Users, for example, users give their credentials, their password only to Fotoware, or if they use something else to log in, such as Office 365 or Active Directory, they give their passwords only to Active Directory. Unlike in older mechanisms that we used for our APIs, where passwords had to be stored in third-party clients, which is not considered very secure. This is the OAuth protocol. So the basic idea is that users use the browser to log in to their accounts. So on the left-hand side, you see the client, you see the browser, and I'm not going to explain all those schematics in detail because we will be seeing it live very soon. Basically, OAuth is based on using browser redirects and also on using a back channel where the application talks directly to the server, that is to Fotoware, to request a token. And the end result is to get an access token, which is then being used for in each API request. OAuth requires user interaction. This means that if your app does not allow user interaction, if it is a script running in the background, you cannot and you should not use OAuth. There are alternative ways of doing this, which we document, which we have documented in our documentation. OAuth applications need to be registered. This is one of its major security features as well, because it means now you can no longer have a selection widget embedded on any website, or there's no easy possibility for malicious websites to steal access tokens, because Fotoware will only redirect to any URL that you have registered beforehand. So this makes it much more secure to integrate with Fotoware and prevents phishing attempts of users' credentials and passwords. As you can see here, there are a lot of options that you have to select and boxes to tick when you register an app. You have to set the application type, whether it's a web app or a native app. You have to select whether it's an API app or selection widget app. And there will be some IDs and secrets and stuff. And I will be showing you in detail what all those things mean and what you can select here. Specifically, one thing that's important when you sell API access, what's the difference between a widget app and an API app? It's very simple. A widget app can only use widgets, such as the selection widget. And an API access can do anything using the Fotoware API. And API apps are naturally more expensive. And what you do when you sell API access to a customer, that's very important to remember. You're also selling them support for the API. So they may be coming back to you and asking, how do I do this? How do I do that? You can, of course, get help from our support, but the more you can do yourself for your customers, the better. So that was a lot of information. And after all that, OAuth may still seem scary and mysterious, and there are all those different application types. And the question is, And if you've seen our documentation, you also see there are different approaches of how to implement OAuth. And to make all this easier for you, we have built this demo app. You may have seen it before, or maybe not. It has a URL that you can see on this slide, fwoauth.demo.fotoware.cloud. You can go there at any time and try this app with your own tenant, with your own Fotoware site. And it will provide clear instructions for each application types of how you register the application and what the client has to do. And we will do this now live for one of those. And it's also open source. It's written in .NET. You can look at the source code. You can use it as a basis for building your own applications. And of course, you can always refer to our documentation. Yeah. Enough with the slides. You've probably all seen this before already. So let's show you something real here. You may have seen OAuth in action before in our own applications. For example, in our Office plugin. So these are my slides. If I click on Insert here, I get this Fotoware button here. And if I click Search, oh, I'm already logged in. I may have to close this. Sorry, this was not part of the plan. So let's just open this again and go to the blank slide and click Insert. And oh, I'm still logged in. Well, okay, I guess I have to skip this part. What you would see here is a button, Login with Fotoware, and it will open a browser, and then you would see the regular Fotoware login page where you can log in, and then you can go back to PowerPoint, and you're logged in, and you can do a search. Let me just see if I can try this one more time. So what you're seeing is not a bug, it's a feature. If you have logged in once, you're already logged in, which is great. It's just not what I wanted to show you. So let me try this one more time, then we will move on to the next step. Oh, well, okay. Okay, yeah. Preparation. What do you need to do in order to develop integrations with Fotoware? There are some very handy tools. One of them is Postman. Postman is a REST client. You can use it to send requests to a server. This is what it looks like. If you've never used it as a tool for building integrations, it's a very good idea to get familiar with it. You should also recommend this to your customers. So it's usually a very good idea to test requests in Postman before you actually write code to send your requests, because if you send requests using code, you never know, is there a problem in my request or is there a problem in my code? With Postman, there is no code, so you can if something doesn't work, you can only get the request wrong. So it's one less thing in the whole equation. There's also Fiddler. You've probably used this before to debug problems with Fotoware. We're not going to use it here, but it's a great tool to have whenever you're doing integrations with a web API. It's also very helpful to have a JSON viewer for your browser. There are extensions for Chrome, or if you use Firefox, you don't need any extensions because it's a built-in feature of Firefox. So let's continue with the demo then. 1 second. I have to end the presentation here. Something is not.
I can see your screen.
Oh,
yeah,
great. Yeah. So I talked about this demo application. So let's have a closer look at this. The first thing you have to enter here, so what you see here is not a real application. What you see here is something that would be like a a configuration interface for an application, or it would be your web.config, or just a set of configuration options that you need before you can run your application. One of the first most important options here is the tenant URL. That is the Fotoware server you want to connect to. So in this case, I'm using an internal preview server, which is not open to the public. So don't try going to this address. Yeah, and you just use the base URL of your site without the /Fotoware. Next, there's the application type. So there are several application types I can choose between. I can choose web application, a web application without a backend, or a native application which simulates a native application using this web app. And there are widget apps as well. So if I change the type here, then the instructions here change. So these instructions, they tell me how these apps work and what are the benefits and downsides, and how I build integrations of this kind. So in this example, we are going to build a web app with a backend. And here it says this application has to be registered first. So let's go to the site settings. You may have seen this before. This is part of the site settings. You can find it when you go to applications in the settings tab. And here is a list of applications that have already been registered. So we've been to a hackathon recently and used the same server. And there is our WordPress plugin that we are working on, and that will soon be released. And if I click Add Application, I can create a new application. So let's have those two windows side by side. So first of all, it tells me to choose Web App API. So let's do this. And you see there's a new field popping up. It's the client secret. We will be needing this later. And it says scope should be API. That's already selected. So here you select between API and widget apps. Then we have to give our application a name. Let's call it demo app. Boring. And then it says here you have to register a redirection URL. So this demo app has its own redirection URL, which we can get from this link. So we just copy it from there, right click and copy. And then we add one here. We can add multiple redirection URLs for every app. And we add this one. So you see this is the same domain as the demo app. It's FWO of demo Fotoware cloud /OAuth2/callback. This is something you can choose for yourself in your app. Yeah, let's add this. And then we would have to save. There's just one thing we need to remember first, the client secret and the client ID. We have to put this into our application. So we need to remember the client ID and the client secret. So we put them in here, and then we can save. So let's go back. There's the run example button where I can just start running the example, or there's this button called permalink, which allows me to remember the settings, and it just creates a URL that I can link to directly if I want to use this multiple times. So I'll just open this in a new tab, and then we can be able to go. So this is the real app, or the real demo app. It starts with showing the user a button to log into Fotoware. And if I click this button, I'm taken to the login page of Fotoware. This is, I'm already logged in on this page, so I'm not seeing a login screen here. But what I could be asked here is to log in, to provide my username and password, or to log in via Office 365. On this system, we have set up Office 365 SSO, so I'm already logged in, and I'm going right to this consent dialog, where Fotoware tells me that this application wants to access my account, and it will tell me what permissions it needs, which is basically everything. And I can accept, or I can choose to not trust this application and decline. So this is where you put your users in control, so they can decide which apps they are going to use or not use. I'll click accept, and then we are here. This is basically the main screen of the application. There's not much to see here. One interesting thing is it knows who I am. It fetches my name using the API. That's something that's happening in the background here. And then there's this button which allows me to open the selection widget. The selection widget is a widget that can be integrated into third-party apps such as CMS or publishing systems. And it provides basic Fotoware functionality in a third-party app, which means browsing archives, searching. So I could search for Chris, and there is a picture with Chris on it, I hope. Oh yeah, there is actually a lot of pictures of Chris. And I can select a photo. Let's take this one. This is another widget, which doesn't quite fit on the screen here. It's called the export widget, which is similar to the export dialog in Fotoware. And you can use it to make some editing, do some editing such as cropping and applying special effects. Yeah, and then you can publish, and then this demo app uses the download API to download, the export API to get the exported image. So here it is. So that's an example of an app you can build using OAuth and the API. In the next step, I'm now going to show you what happens behind the scenes here. So this seems to just work, but you still probably have no idea how to implement this. And even if you looked at the example code, you probably wouldn't know where to start. So I'll show you OAuth in slow motion or done manually. And to do this, we will go back here and register a new app. So first of all, I need a domain for my app. For the purpose of this demo, we will be using a domain that doesn't exist. That's intentional. Let me just find something that is definitely not registered. Here we have something. So let's go back to the application registration dialog and put those side by side and create a new app. It will still be a web app using the API. Let's call it my awesome application and register a URL. And here I'm using my awesome application.xyz. So that's an unregistered domain, and there's no server responding to it. And here again, I have my client ID and client secret. So let's put them in here and in here. And an important thing to remember here is that you should not use the client secret. So once you have saved the application, only you know the client secret, not even Fotoware knows it. So let's just copy it into Notepad for later use. The only way, if you lost your client secret, the only thing you can do is generate a new one, but you should typically have your client secret stored in your application configuration, so there's no way you can lose it anyway. So it's important to save. And then let's just do the same thing again. We click permalink, so we can start over in case something doesn't go the way it should. And then we just run the example. So when I click here, I get an error message using the familiar Fotoware kitten. It says the redirection URL is not registered with this application. And that's true because our demo app is not using the redirection URL that we have registered using this fictitious domain, but it's using its own redirection URI. So let's have a look here. This is the URL I just copied from this error page, and it is this is the OAuth authorization URL. So it begins with your Fotoware tenant address, and then there's a fixed path called photoweb/OAuth/authorize. This is the authorization endpoint. It's always the same thing. And then there are some parameters. Let me just split those parameters up so we can look at them one by one. The first parameter is called response type code. So that is always the same. It means you don't want an access token back. You want an authorization code, which is something intermediate that you can use to get the actual authorization token later. I will explain in a while why this is, or maybe we can do this at the end. It's just the way OAuth works, and it's one of the reasons why OAuth is secure. Then there is the client ID, which we got from the application registration or from our configuration options. So you have to put this in here. The state, this is a random string you generate. You should use a cryptographically safe random generator here. Every operating system has a function for doing that. And it has to be random and sufficiently long. And this is also for security. You will have to, because Fotoware will send you this string back, and you have to check that is the same value they send to it. Because if it's a different one, it means that someone is trying to do something fishy and trying to send something to your application's redirection URL that is not expected. It's called state for a reason, because it means you can also use it to convey state. So if you have multiple users logging into application, this can be something that you link with the user session. So you know which user, so that when you get the response back from Fotoware, you know which request it belongs to. So you can have a map somewhere in your app that maps those random strings to some additional data. Typically, it would be a user session if you have regular session management in your web app. And then finally, there's the redirect URI, URL encoded. So it looks a little bit cryptic, but you may recognize it. It is FWO of demo Fotoware Cloud. And that's why Fotoware is complaining, because that's not the one we should be using. We registered a different URL, if you remember. So let's see here what we registered. We registered this one, my awesome application.xyz. So let's change the redirection URL to what is actually expected. And let's just put the URL back together. I'll need this for later, so I'll just make a copy of it. Okay. This part should be URL encoded. So the colon and the slashes, they would normally be encoded, but it actually works without doing that. Just you shouldn't do it like this. I'm just saving time here. And if I go back to the browser, to this beautiful error page, where's my mouse? Here it is, and put this in here, we get to our consent dialog. So something seems to be working, and now it says the application, my awesome application, is requesting the following permissions on your behalf. It also wants to ask for full access, and let's click accept. And it's not working. So why? That's very easy, because now we see something new here. We see my awesome application.xyz, which doesn't exist. So that would be your application having to respond to this redirection URL. So this is the redirection URL we registered, and of course there's no server answering, and that's on purpose because I want to show you what this URL looks like that that Fotoware is calling here. So let's have a look. First of all, this is just what we registered. It's exactly the same URL, and then there are parameters that Fotoware added by itself. And the first one, the most important one, is code. I'll get to this in a second. And there's another one which is called state. And if we look at this one, the state is the same as up here. So first of all, we have proven that this is not someone else trying to call us here. It's actually the response for the same user trying to log in. And we can use this state to recognize which user this is. For example, link it to a user account in our own application. And then this is the code. It's called the authorization code, which is an intermediate code that you get from Fotoware, which you can use to request an access token. You don't need to understand this, so you just take this string, and then you have to use it in a request that you have to send to the Fotoware API. For this purpose, we will be using Postman. I've prepared this request because it's quite complicated. It's all documented, so don't worry about it. And we paste the code here in the code parameter. So these are post parameters. We're sending a post request. The client secret has to be, so that's where you get to use the client secret. If you have been wondering why the client secret has not been part of the first URL, which you may have noticed if you've been paying attention. So here you need the client secret, but unfortunately Fotoware cannot give us the client secret anymore. That's because it is stored as a hash, but we have stored it in Notepad for later use. So let's put in the client secret. And then I guess we are good to go. So let's send this request. Here we get a response, and it's saying the application is not registered. Yeah, because I forgot one thing, and that's the client ID. The client ID is what we I have too many windows here. It's what we had here. No, sorry. Oh, sorry, I'm on the wrong screen. Here we have our client ID. So the client ID has to be the same as in the authorization request. And what you have registered for your app, then we send this. And we get another error. It says the authorization code is invalid or has expired. That's because I've been talking too much. These codes are only valid for 1 minute. So we have to be faster. The good thing is we can just go back here and we have to, it went back to the old URL. So I just use Notepad and, sorry, use the URL that we, is this the one that we, yeah, that's the right one. So we just repeat the whole process. Consent dialog, accept, and we take the code quickly before it expires. Your application should be faster than me. But right now we are doing what the application is supposed to be doing automatically, what your code is supposed to be doing. So let's paste it and send. And here we get a response. We get an access token. So we're done. We just authorized an application to use the Fotoware API, and now it has an access token, which it can use to make API requests. So let's see if that works. I've prepared something here. Let's just simplify this request. So here I have a request. This is the URL of an archive. So if I go to the browser, I could open this URL right here, and it will show me an archive with photos. So you see some photos of Fotoware employees, and if I add .json to the end, I get the API response, which is in JSON format. This works because I'm logged in, but we're not using OAuth here. So let me show you this in Postman. If I send this request without any authorization header or any cookies or anything, I get an error, unauthorized. But if I go back and take the access token that we obtained via OAuth, and I send an authorization header, and I put this in here. So we have to put in the string bearer and a space and the access token. Then we're getting an API response. So here you get a lot of JSON. And here in the beginning, for example, we can see the URL of what did I just send here? Oh, I'm sorry. Let me. This was from a prop format test that I did. To go back to what it was. So here I get information about the archive. I get the name of the archive, I get a description, I get its URL, and lots of information about it. But maybe I'm only interested in what images are there. Then I can change the accept header to application VND Fotoware asset list plus JSON, and I just get a list of images. So that's what I was wondering about before. So here, for example, we get the URL. If I take this and went back to the browser, where is it? Oh, sorry, here. And I just replace this, the path of the URL with this. I'm getting the details page of this picture of Chris. So you see that the URLs are pretty much the same as same in the browser, in the UI, in the standard UI, as they are in the API. Let's do something more advanced. We can also do search. For this, we can add something like this. We add the Q parameter. Let's search for Radmila. And we get another list of assets. And if we scroll down a bit here, we see a list of previews. So here's a preview, which is supposed to have a size of 800 times 800. So let's take this one. Go back to the browser. I could, of course, use Postman to download the image, but the browser is usually better for the showing images. And we get this picture. So we just retrieved a preview using the API. Yeah, that's it. So you've seen how to use OAuth and how to make API requests using an OAuth access token. And that's it for this introduction. So there are some more advanced topics that we could talk about. For example, there's refresh tokens that you can use to refresh your access token when it has run out, when it has expired. The process is a little bit more complicated for native apps, which would maybe a different topic. We could, I can actually, that was actually part of the plan. I can show you how to use the selection widget. So if I go back to the response, the OAuth response I got here, and I take the access token, we can do this. We can go to the browser. It's not this one. Sorry. Well, this one was fine. And I can add widgets / selection to the path. You may remember this URL, and then I can add a parameter. It has to be a fragment parameter for various internal reasons. And in a widget only app, it is a question mark. This has very specific reasons, so it's very important to read the documentation here. The reasons for this are not very interesting. We can talk about this over beer or something, but it's just important that you use it the right way. And then we add our access token. I still have something in the browser history here. That's why it just jumps back and forth. And we see the selection widget. So if you put this access token into the selection widget URL, and if you put this URL into an iframe, you have embedded the selection widget into your application. So I can just browse around here and select an image, and if I select something, nothing will happen, because that's because there is no application around the selection widget that is interested in my selection. So there would be, you have to write some JavaScript to catch an event or something. But you get the basic idea. We could also talk about webhooks, and I've shown you how to get previews and how to do searching. That may be topics for future webinars. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Florian. And I think that you're ending on a note that's very relevant for partners. If there's anything that you would like to go more in depth about, want to learn more about, then you can also suggest that as a future topic, because then we can have another similar webinar with Florian. But also, just before we started, Florian showed me that a lot of this is documented already. So we will be publishing that soon for you to access.